Shelton?
Here.
Dr. Newman?
Here.
Mr. Hales?
Here.
And Mr. Fraley.
Here we have a full quorum, and we'll get right into our agenda.
Okay, before taking up the items on today's agenda, we will consider the following request for a continuance. The following item is being continued from the January public hearing agenda to the February 2020 public hearing agenda. Regular item number 14, Renia Weilenman to vacate the right-of-way of an unnamed 15-foot lane lying west of Middle Avenue, north of Summit Avenue, east of West Avenue, and south of Lamont Street. So the motion would be to continue this item. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
Mr. Fraley?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to today's agenda. The first item on the agenda is a request by the City Planning Commission for a text amendment to the Norfolk zoning ordinance to add short-term rental, vacation rental, to HCWF1 West Freemason Historic and Cultural Conservation and HCWF2 West Freemason Historic and Cultural Conservation zoning district in Table 3.6.11, Principal, Accessory, and Temporary Use Table for Historic and Cultural Conservation-based zoning districts.
Good afternoon. So as Susan said, this is a request for zoning text amendment to add the use of vacation rental, short-term rental as a conditional use in the HCWF1 and HCWF2 zoning districts. When this use was created in 2018, it was not permitted in historic districts. So homestay is currently permitted there, but vacation rental is not. So there have been multiple requests to permit this use in the West Freemason historic districts, and staff has received notification from the Civic League that they have met with property owners to discuss these proposed amendments and that they support adding this conditional use. Vacation rental applicants will still be required to meet the performance standards and development standards that address the number of allowable bedrooms and guests, the payment of taxes, and the provision of off-street parking. So staff is recommending that the text amendment requests be approved, as the amendments will align regulations with similar neighborhoods, and the performance and development standards will address any externalities that could arise with any individual vacation rental proposals. So I'll stand by for questions.
Hank, you say you have received indication from the neighborhood that they like the option of having short-term rentals?
Yes, they would like to have the ability to apply for a conditional use permit to operate vacation rental.
Commissioners?
That's all I got.
Susan?
No speakers?
Anybody sign up? No speakers? No.
Okay. The motion is to recommend approval of the text amendment to the Norfolk zoning ordinance. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley?
Aye.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a request by Enterprise Rent-A-Car for a conditional use permit to operate an automobile rental facility at 7436 North Military Highway. The purpose of this request is to allow an existing automobile rental facility to expand the building square footage. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So again, this is a request by Enterprise Rent-A-Car for a conditional use permit. The site is located on the east side of Military Highway, north of Johnson's Road. The corridor is mainly commercial. There is some residential directly across the street to the west. The car rental facility is currently there now, and they would like to expand. The site is zoned CC, which is community commercial, and that allows automobile rental by a conditional use permit. So why is the site here? So as I mentioned, a automobile rental facility has been there for nearly 20 years. They were there long before we required a conditional use permit to do automobile rental. However, they came in with a proposal for an expansion. When you want to expand a non-conforming use, you have to become compliant. And by compliant, in this case, one of the things they're required to do is to get the conditional use permit. So that's why they're here. They're expanding the currently legally non-conforming use. This is the site here. Again, there's currently 2 buildings on the site. The area that is circled is where they are proposing the expansion. The expansion, my understanding is it's really like a carport area, and they want to do maintenance of their rental vehicles under that carport. So again, that's the expansion. That's what's causing them to come in for the conditional use permit today. Staff is recommending that the application be approved. And as we always do with these conditional use permits, we have a series of conditions, and it is with those conditions that we recommend approval. What I want to do is we have our standard conditions that pertain to any automobile-related use. However, as we do, there are specific conditions that relate to the site that we are looking for. So some improvements that we are looking for on this site, any potholes or other damage within the parking lot shall be repaired. All razor wire shall be removed from the site. A 6-foot solid wood fence shall be provided along the rear property line. A new freestanding sign in compliance with all current sign regulations shall be installed, including the landscaping around the base and the old sign removed. And then finally, landscaping shall be installed along North Military Highway in accordance with the landscape plan approved by the Department of Recreation, Parks, and Open Space. So with those requirements and the other standard conditions pertaining to automobile uses, staff is recommending support of this use at this
I didn't
stage.
hear you mention sidewalks.
So there is not a sidewalk. I did confirm that along here. And I do believe when they met with transportation, because there is no sidewalks on either of the adjacent sites, they did not recommend that a sidewalk be installed here.
That doesn't support our concept of complete streets too well, does it?
That is something we can add a condition about a sidewalk.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions of Ms. Pollard, commissioners? Here to speak is the applicant, Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Hello, my name is Kyle Ellis. I'm with Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
And I'm Sarah Lowe.
And your mailing addresses, please?
323 Alexander Lee Parkway, Williamsburg, Virginia.
That's same. That's the business office.
Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
Sure. We actually spoke with Susan earlier today, and she had actually answered all of our questions. So we were just here for support and to answer any questions that you would have on our behalf.
But we have a concept in our city we call complete streets, which involves sidewalks, and I realize and recognize that you folks are doing a lot to improve this site. I'd like to ask you to include sidewalks across your portion of this property. Can you accommodate us in that regard?
Something that we'd have to look at and consider. Certainly, if we could speak with Susan about that. I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but that's certainly something that we would consider.
It entails placing some sidewalks.
Sure, I understand. Obviously, the
It's
cost.
just there's no sidewalks on others. So we would do a sidewalk just in front of our location only.
That's exactly what I'm
Gotta start
asking.
somewhere.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Okay.
Is that doable?
Is that something that we would have to answer today?
That
We
would
could
be
continue.
nice.
I know.
We could continue this and pick it
you'd
up if
like.
you needed time to.
If you need time.
Yeah,
to
if we could
consider
just have a
that.
little bit of time to consider that.
We'll give you 30 days. Is that sufficient?
That's
Yes.
more than sufficient.
Okay, and get back to us at that point.
Sure.
Right.
And in the meantime, we can make sure there's no utilities there that would prevent
Thank you.
that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you,
Thanks,
sir.
guys.
Thanks so
Thank
very much. Susan, the motion is, well.
So the
you
motion
call
would be to continue the item until your February 2020 meeting. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Hi.
Mr. Hales?
Yes.
And Mr. Fairley?
Aye, thank you. Appreciate your accommodation in that regard. Item 3, Susan.
Okay. Item number 3 is a request by Auto Expo of Virginia, Inc. for a conditional use permit to operate an automobile sales facility at 5045 East Princess Anne Road. The purpose of this request is to allow automobile sales.
Auto Expo Virginia at 5045 East Princess Anne Road. It's located in the River Oaks neighborhood on the south side of East Princess Anne Road between McNeil Avenue and Halsted Avenue. The applicant is proposing to operate an automobile sales establishment. The site is zoned CC for community commercial, which allows the use of auto sales with a conditional use permit. The proposed use is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates this site as commercial and calls to bring automobile establishments into compliance with applicable codes with an emphasis on buffering, landscaping, and parking. So the site is currently vacant, but it was used as a tire sales facility and automobile repair facility in the past. So with the new conditional use permit, the site would no longer be grandfathered for those uses and would not be, Auto Expo would not be permitted for that use. So it's located on a commercial node on East Princess Anne Road, but there are single-family homes directly to the east and south of the property. The applicant proposes to operate from 9:30 a.m. until 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and will not be open on Sunday. This is the proposed site plan for the project. The applicant's proposing a new 10-foot landscape buffer to the rear abutting the single-family homes and a 6-foot buffer on the side yard on the abutting adjacent commercial space. They're also proposing to install a new sidewalk, verge, curb, and gutter with a 10-foot landscape buffer, and will be required to repair and maintain any potholes on the property. There are 4 parking spaces available for staff and customers, and there'll be 23 spaces for cars for sale. There's an unpaved area to the rear of the property that the applicant would like to use in the future. So, but since it's not paved currently, it'll have to go through the site plan review process in the city before it is able to be used by the applicant. So it's showed as a future display area on the site plan. So they don't have to come back for a second conditional use permit when they do decide to develop that back rear area. But they will not be permitted to use that rear lot until it has received site plan approval, because you're not allowed to park cars on an unimproved surface. So these are the photos of that rear area. No cars will be permitted to park in this area, and it will be required to be kept in a vegetated condition that is neat and trimmed until it has been developed with an approved site plan. So staff did receive a letter of support from the River Oaks Civic League this week, and given the past use of the site as an automobile-related business and the proposed improvements on the site, staff is recommending approval of this conditional use permit with the conditions listed on the staff report.
Hank, is it your understanding that there will be no parking in that fenced-in area?
That is my understanding.
No storage of any vehicles of any type in that fenced-in area?
They will not be able to use it for anything. And they have to remove that trailer as well.
A curiosity question, and I don't know if we hadn't occurred to me until now. Is there going to be any additional lighting on this site?
Not to my knowledge, but I think the applicant is here, so
Okay.
they would be able to answer that.
Good deal. And the surrounding, I guess that's the River Oaks Civic League, did they provide you any feedback whatsoever?
We got a letter of support from them this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hank, excuse me, Hank, any questions of Mr. Morrison, Commissioners?
I do have a question. Hank, it's my understanding that this area in the back, you've said several times, there will be no parking there, it will be in a vegetated state. What happens to the permit if there is parking there? How is that?
It's in one of the conditions is that that area is not to be used as until it's been developed through the site plan review process. So I imagine it would be revoked, I think, if they break any of the conditions within that conditional use permit.
So let me jump in real quick. Mr. Houchins, we sort of scale up our enforcement activities. So revocation is sort of the end of the game. But we would first provide them a notice of violation and ask them to abate it. And as long as they did and it didn't continue to be a problem, we would consider that that enforcement action had been successful. If it continues, however, to be a problem or they refuse, then we could move towards revocation of the CUP.
Thank you. And who monitors that?
So the Department of Planning has a zoning compliance inspector who is responsible for ensuring compliance with the conditions that are established through the conditional use permit process, as well as any conditions that appear as part of the zoning process.
So this condition is monitored through the Department of
Right.
Planning.
Planning monitors the conditions that are established through CUPs and conditional zonings.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Hank. Here in favor of this application, forgive me on the first name, but Pavel, Pavel. You care to share anything with us, sir? You're just here for information.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pavel. This is my partner Eugene. We owners of the business of Auto Expo that we operate in city of Norfolk. This property gives us opportunity.
Mr. Pavel, if you would give us your mailing address, please.
It's 7912 Ardmore Road, Norfolk. This is Virginia 23518.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So this property that we're trying to purchase would give us a good opportunity to move from small dealership where we're at right now on the back street of in Norfolk, and make it nice and presentable. I have a couple pictures from 2018, and as you can see, this property used to be car repair and tire place. So you see a bunch of cars parked in the back and the front tires. This is 2018. This is 2017. You see like boat and carports. 2016. So we spoke with Civic League, and they told us that this property has been used and abused for many, many years. Since it's grandfathered, you pretty much can do anything you want there. Park, make it junkyard or kind of junkyard. So with all developments and with seller, we agreed, basically they put 10-foot fence in the back already. It's brand new because it was laying down. We have to put the landscape barrier in the back, on the side, and on the front. This area we fully understand we cannot use till we go through a further process of put it paving and everything else. So for now, for us just to move in, we'll be using just the front with 23 units in the front. You ask about lighting. They have 2 light bulbs here. One of them is almost down, so we'll fix that. It's not going to be pointing to the residential. We might install a couple lights on the front of the building just to make some lighting for the cars, but mainly we'll be fixing 2 pointing this way. I think you already saw the side plan. This is the landscape barrier and one in the front, and we only will be using for now, since it's kind of expensive process to fix the back, just the front of the building. To add to it, this is our existing car lot. As you can see, we have home in the back and another business on the side. We have 4.9 review on Google. We try to treat our customers right and not to mess with neighbors. As you all know, it's very easy if you did something wrong to leave a bad review. So our reviews are almost 5.0. And this is examples of our inventory. Mainly it's fresh cars with less than 100,000 miles. We don't deal with in-house finance customers, so mainly it's customers looking for good deals. They're ready to buy. Credit union customers that looking for good deals. This is all I have to say. If you have any questions, I can.
How many vehicles for sale do you anticipate having?
Right
your
now,
max capacity for vehicles
okay,
for sale?
the maximum capacity for this location without future development is 23.
Okay.
At this moment, the location we're at now, on average, we have between 12 up to 18. But the lot we're using, it's a grandfather in, so it's kind of packed like the other location used to be. So this newer property would allow us to actually move all our cars, maybe buy a few more, but you at least would have room to have a safe test drive, and you don't have to pull another car without moving a couple in the front.
I appreciate you taking the initiative on that lighting. I look forward to you, enhancing the lighting there as best you can. I think that has some value there. And you've heard our concerns about that fenced-in area. You're giving me your assurance then, or giving this commission assurance that there will not be any vehicles stored in that fenced-in area,
We will not till we get it.
or other debris of a motor vehicle type.
We do light repairs, and as I said, the room in the front is more than enough for us for now. As we develop, if the business goes well, we'll pave the rear portion, and as I said, we're not going to be using it for now. I mean, we understand we're not supposed to do that.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Excuse me, any question, Mr. Palmer?
Did I understand correctly that what you're going to landscape is just to the edge of the property where you are presently interested in using it until a later date?
No,
Or have I
I'll show you the
misunderstood?
picture one more time with side plan.
There, that's, yeah.
Okay, so maybe you can see it a little bit better on. I'll start with side plan. Okay, so as far as landscaping, we have to do 10-foot barrier in the back. It's not there. We only made the seller put the 10-foot fence. It was 8 foot and it was down. It was laying on the ground. And you can see it on the city pictures. But it's gonna be the back. It's gonna be 6-foot landscaping barrier on the side, including like there is a dealership right here next to us. But I mean we have to cut the concrete and put landscaping like on the side, and in the front is gonna be 10-foot too. So it's gonna be all around. And right here you have a little creek. It's already covered with a lot of bushes. I mean, so it's you cannot really see the neighbors here on the side. So it's gonna be pretty much all around.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions of Mr. Powell, commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Also here in favor of this application, Mr. Sharovic. I must have mispronounced it.
He's my partner.
Okay. Also here to answer questions with regard to this application, Robin Thomas. Thank you, Robin. Here to speak against this application, Robert Chico. Chico. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Chico. I reside at 1551 Lee View Avenue in Norfolk. I'm here to represent Marlin Motors, Jeff Fox, Fox Investors, who has the car lot that's sitting on the corner. We're just concerned because for the last 15 years, the place has been a junkyard and it's been an environmental hazard. We've had to really listen to a lot of the city men and women coming by to complain about different things because it's either not open or when it's open, it's created a havoc. And we just wanted to bring that to the attention of the council to let you know that that's what we feel.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully what this application seems to portend is they're going to improve that site.
Yes, sir.
And more importantly, maintain it after they do.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
If
that
it happens, it happens.
I'm going to sure that you're going to be keeping us apprised if they should fall short of that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We appreciate everything you guys do for the city of Norfolk. I've been born and raised here, and I couldn't be any prouder than what you guys do and how you run things from everywhere around. I know you have your hiccups, but you make it happen, so we appreciate it.
You're very kind, sir. Thank you very
I
much.
appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any comment?
I just want to point out, I see the Enterprise car people are still here. I've just noted this application, they're putting a sidewalk in here too. That's a standard process, just point that out.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. Susan?
The motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions contained in the draft ordinance. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchin?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley.
All right, we'll make that recommendation to council. Good luck.
Okay, the next application is a request by Hendrick Automotive Group for the following conditional use permits at 6200, 6210, 6222, 6252, and 6266 East Virginia Beach Boulevard, A, for automobile sales, and B, automotive repair and maintenance facility, major. The purpose of these requests is to allow the existing automobile sales and service establishment to expand to the adjacent properties. So this, again, is a request by Hendrick Automotive Group. The site is located on the north side of East Virginia Beach Boulevard, east of Kempsville, and actually goes from Kempsville all the way east to Land Street. You can see it's on the very end of that photo there. This proposal would allow, as I mentioned, the expansion of Hendrick Auto, who is on a portion of the site now. The site actually has two different zoning districts, CC So the lighter pink on the left-hand side is the CC, and then the darker red is the CR. Both of them would allow both of these uses through a conditional use permit. Through the years, this site has been operated by various users, and various users have obtained various conditional use permits for either car sales, car repair, or both. The site that is not right on the corner, but just in from the corner, did obtain a conditional use permit to do car sales. However, since they never obtained a business license and operated, that conditional use permit is no longer valid. So because the applicant wanted to expand, particularly to that site, but really all the way to the corner, they were required to come in and cover that site with a conditional use permit. To clean things up, we suggested that they apply for a conditional use permit, one for the car sales and one for the car repair, to cover all of Hendrick. So again, all the way from land to that corner on Kempsville, and that thereby covering also that one lot where the conditional use permit became invalid because lack of use. The corner site is the site that has been impacted. They purchased it. They did demo the buildings on both of those sites. And they are proposing, and this is the site plan that they are proposing. They are making their way through site plan right now, which means there will be improvements, as we know, to the site, landscaping, stormwater, resilience. So all of that will be done through the site plan review process. As we know, there also is a tower on the site that is existing. It is currently being used by Verizon and we believe one other user at least. And actually that tower did receive a conditional use permit. So staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permits to cover the entire site. I don't think I mentioned Hendrick or similar use has been on the site most furthest to the east since I think it was 31. So really this is just an expansion of that use on to two other sites, again, that have already had that use in their history. So subject to the conditions contained in the staff report, staff is recommending that the conditional use permits be approved.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions of Susan, commissioners? Thank you, Susan. Here representing the applicant, Greg Hartley. Greg Hartley.
Hi, Greg Hartley with EMH&T Engineers. EMH&T is located at 301 McCullough Drive, Suite 109, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262. I'm just here to answer any questions you may have about the expansion, and also the design manager from Hendrick Automotive Group is here also, James Woodruff Jr.
Good. Any questions, commissioners, of this representative of the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair also acknowledges James Woodruff.
That is I, sir.
Thank you. Anything you care to tell us, sir?
No, sir. I'm not
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair acknowledges that there is no opposition to this application. Comments, commissioners? Susan?
Okay, the motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permits, subject to the conditions contained in the draft ordinance.
Susan, excuse me. Sidewalks. Are we gonna have sidewalks here, sir?
They already exist.
Okay. Along Kempsville Road as well?
That's the part that's going through site plan, so it will, yeah.
Yes, there are, and we're adding some additional landscaping as well as redoing all of the lighting to LED fixtures on the entire site through a process that Hendrick does.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Susan?
Okay, Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fairley?
I will make that recommendation to council. Good luck.
Okay, the next item, item number 5 on your agenda, David A. Cruz Vega for a conditional use permit to operate a short-term rental unit, vacation rental at 1519 Longwood Drive. The purpose of this request is to allow the existing single-family homes to operate as a short-term rental unit.
So as Susan already mentioned, the application is a request for a conditional use permit to be able to operate a short-term rental at 1519 Longwood Drive. Your first slide shows an area of the subject property. It is located on the south side, Longwood Drive, between Quarantine Drive and I believe it's pronounced Powhatan, thank you, Avenue in the Larchmont, Edgewater neighborhood. Apologize, I'm not from here. As we see in the property, as we see from this slide, the property is zoned single family SF10. The house is listed as a 4-bedroom home. If approved, the short-term rental under zoning code would be limited to just a total of 8 guests only. Vacation rentals in the suburban character district must provide at least 1 off-street parking per bedroom. As we already established, there are 4 bedrooms, so there must be, the site must have a minimum of 4 parking spaces. As you can see there, the applicant did extend his driveway with pavers to meet that requirements. There is a fence that blocks that driveway, but I have had a conversation with the applicant. Apparently that fence does open up. And the applicant is aware that at the time that they, if approved, they will remove the obstacles of the dumpsters and the basketball hoop. So there will be a free and clear access to the to that 4th parking space. The Civic League did hear about this. Oops, I'm sorry. I apologize. Civic League did hear about this application. They chose not to take a position at this time. However, we did receive a few emails from neighboring residents in opposition, and the applicant did provide a signed letter of support from 2 households within his neighborhood. Just to remind everyone, unlike most conditional use permits in Norfolk, this conditional use permit will only be valid for 2 years. Staff recommends approval upon conditions listed in the staff report. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions.
Thank you, Joy. Any questions of Joy, commissioners? Pavers qualify for a driveway.
My understanding, they do.
Thank you, Joy.
I'm going to just stay up here because I have the next.
That's right, you do.
Applicants.
We do have
That's right, I'm
some
sorry, I
folks here to
forgot.
speak. You have to take a seat, Joy. Here, and the chair would like to acknowledge David Cruz Vega.
Hi, I'm David Cruz Vega. I'm the homeowner at 1519 Longwood Drive. That's where I live. That's where my family lives. To be honest, the reason I really wanted to do this, I'm a public school teacher here in Norfolk. I teach at Crossroads School off Tidewater Drive. We moved to Norfolk 2 years ago for my wife to finish her PhD program at ODU. And we purchased the home specifically with the intention of using this as a means to supplement our income while we're a single income family for this hopefully very short time in our life. We live there, but as a school teacher, I do have the summers off, so that's our intention with the conditional use permit, is that when we are not around and visiting family back in South Carolina, that we can use it as a means to earn a little bit of extra money. We did do this prior, and we were notified by the city, before we were notified by the city that we needed this conditional use permit. We were very adamant about contacting our neighbors, making sure that nothing was going on. We also had perfect reviews on the listing services. Really, we're just, this was kind of an opportunity that we saw as a means to make it happen for my wife to complete her PhD program while I continue my career as a public school teacher. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
What are your neighbors telling you, Mr. Vega?
That they didn't even notice there were people there, other than some different cars being in the driveway.
You know, I think somebody needs to tell you, we appreciate you coming forward to go through this process.
Yes, thank you so much.
There are indeed a number of folks who are doing what you're doing that have chosen, for whatever reason, not to come forward. And it's our hope that we can get our arms around this and entice more people to come along. I'm curious as to how you felt about the process.
It was a little more than I was expecting, but the planning department was super helpful and explain. And I'm a civics teacher, by the way. I very much thought I understood how government worked. Yeah. But yes, they were very helpful with all the questions I had, especially in learning coding language and also being new to Virginia, understanding some of the requirements the city had.
Did you give them the benefit of knowing you were a civics teacher before you began this process?
I did. I did.
Okay.
Yes.
And again, it's your intention then, because just like this is new to you, this is becoming new to us as well.
Yes, that's my understanding.
We're trying to evolve this thing and get our arms around it at the same time. So that I understand you to say that this is going to be a summertime endeavor for you, essentially, that the other, well, at least while during the school year, you and your wife would be the prime and sole occupants of this property?
Yes, I mean we lived there with our 2 young boys, and that was part of the conversation I have with the planning department. Is that I do as best as possible want it to maintain to be my private residence during that time period, but I also know that I need to accept that it needs to be publicized in order for me to be able to do the Airbnb or a VRBO. So. It's our primary residence. I mean, when we go to South Carolina, it's to stay with my in-laws.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, commissioners, any other questions?
I had one
Yes, ma'am.
question. I noticed in the packet that we have your reviews are in the packet, and you do have a 5.0. And the reviews that you've provided are all July and August. So, or is this? I mean, how often? I'm just curious, or is it just sort of? Is it like once a month, twice a month?
Yeah, well, this past year, I mean, we are gone for the summer, so we'll list the summer dates. I mean, with your approval, we'd like to we live close to ODU for my wife's access to school, so we would like to occasionally list it for a home football game, just as a market opportunity. But that would also mean that we'd have to find somewhere else to go, so it's not necessarily cost effective either to do it during that time.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just have one question as well, and like my fellow commissioners, we appreciate you coming forward and bringing what obviously is an existing business for you, summer months, into compliance with our relatively new city ordinance. Have you actually parked on that driveway space?
I have.
Okay.
So basically, I went and sought permitting through the city to add that, and at the recommendation of I'm sorry, I'm bad with names, but the individual downstairs, he said that I could use the pavers because that was my question. And then the inspection came and they approved it as an extra parking space also. And I have the documentation from that. I believe I gave it to the Planning Commission.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Have any of your neighbors voiced any opposition to you, Mr. Vega?
No, and I've gone door to door to ask if there was a problem because I understand it's their neighborhood just as much as it is mine. But everyone, I mean, a few of them had no idea it was going on and hadn't noticed when we did have guests over the summer. Our direct neighbor is good friends of ours, and she mentioned that she didn't notice. Her son ended up playing with one of the guests one time, and that was her only interaction with the guests.
I commend you on really feeling that the neighborhood belongs to others as well as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for thinking in that manner. We appreciate it.
Any other questions of Mr. Vega at this point? Comment? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Here in opposition to this application, Gene Swartz.
Hello, I'm Jean Swartz. I live at 1403 Runnymede Road, Norfolk, Virginia 23505. And I actually own a property at 1505 Longwood, just a couple houses down from this property. And so I'm attending today, and I wasn't sure if I would be in opposition or support because I wasn't familiar with the language of short-term rental unit. If the rentals are taking place in the summer, I would see that it wouldn't be a problem because parking there is a real problem. It's a permit area. And it's only on one side of the street. And so the students, mine is a rental for students. It's difficult for the parking right there. So in the summer, I would see it not being a problem because there's not the competition for parking right there. So I would only be concerned that it might be a problem at the football games if it was also leased at that time. So that's my input. And I know this neighbor, and he is a very good neighbor. Even though I don't actually live there, I'm on the property quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So, but I did want to come to this process since I wasn't aware either that Airbnb needed one of these permits. I don't have any, but I have an open unit right now. One 2-bedroom, 1 bath, a great property. And so I'm kind of out of the window right now. If you don't catch somebody by January, you're often open till May. So I've entertained it. So maybe visiting somebody and planning. So any questions for me?
Commissioners, any questions of Ms. Swartz?
What did you say the property address was that you own?
1509 Longwood.
1509, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Swartz, thank you for coming out.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Now we would normally be in rebuttal, but the opposition that we had seemed to come on to your side. So that kind of diffuses the need for a rebuttal, I would think. Commissioners, any other question or comment?
I have a question for
Go
staff.
Go ahead.
One of the letters we received just before the meeting of opposition referenced their concern about being a student rental. Can you talk to us about this, a possibility of short-term rentals being a student rental? Is that a possibility?
Well, Mr. Vice Chairman, as you know, anything is possible, but the short-term rental program is intended to focus on rentals that are less than 30 days, therefore less than a semester, and so the likelihood of renting to a student to us seems to be reasonably remote, although, as I prefaced it, pretty much anything's possible. The part of the idea of the short-term rental, quite frankly, is when we were thinking about it in neighborhoods adjacent to ODU and NSU, is that it gives people an opportunity to generate income without renting to students in those neighborhoods. And we do know from experience that the student rentals, not trying to throw shade on students, but student rentals often come with some negative externalities in terms of activity levels and number of cars and things like that. So this actually we see as potentially a type of use that would be more in keeping with the neighborhood and maintaining neighborhood character than, in fact, the typical student rental. Did that answer your question, sir?
Perfectly, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask staff a question as well?
Yes, sir.
I wasn't aware until the presentation today that this street was permit parking only. It occurs to me if the commission wants to add it, you could impose a condition that would be as much of a benefit for the neighborhood as for the guests, that this applicant be required to include in his listings and notify any of his bookings that parking on the street is not permitted because they won't have the permit. And that might save a big headache for someone who's visiting from having to retrieve their car from the tow lot. But that would have to be added, I think, because it wasn't part of the staff report.
I think that sounds reasonable from my perspective because I don't think I was aware of that either. So if it's going to be a rigid parking requirement, we probably need to have the applicant to include that in advertisements.
Mr. Vega, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. We appreciate that, bringing that to our attention. Susan?
Okay. The motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit subject to the conditions contained in the staff report, including the new condition pertaining to no parking shall be permitted on the street. And we'll craft that better. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley?
I will make that recommendation to council. Good luck and thank you.
Okay, item number 6, Boho Bungalow for a conditional use permit to operate a short-term rental unit, vacation rental at 1805 Pope Avenue. The purpose of this request is to allow the existing single-family home to operate as a short-term rental unit.
So as Susan said, this is another request for a conditional use permit for a short-term rental, this one at 1805 Pope Avenue. Our first slide shows the area of the subject property. Site is located south of Pope Avenue between Tidewater Drive and Jason Avenue in the Lafayette, Winona neighborhood. As we can see from the slide, the property is zoned single-family traditional. Home is currently operating as a registered homestay. To qualify as a homestay, the owner was required to obtain a business license, pass a fire inspection, provide proof of liability insurance, and demonstrate the availability of required off-street parking, which for this site, under traditional character district, they are required to provide 0.67 per bedrooms. There are 3 bedrooms, which calculates to 2 parking spaces. With a driveway that's over 60 feet long, the site has ample space to meet parking requirements. If approved, a short-term rental, this site would be limited to 6 guests only. That is based off of 2 per bedroom. And like the previous application, again, this CUP would be valid for only 2 years. The Lafayette Winona Civic League discussed the proposal. Meeting minutes were recorded, and they did mention that there was some pushbacks from the attendees of the meeting. However, they did not vote to approve or not approve. They just acknowledged that it was addressed. Staff did receive a letter of opposition, as included in your report. The letter of opposition did express some concerns about rotating tenants, parking, and increased traffic, very similar to the concerns that you heard at the last application. And just another reminder, conditional use permits are valid for only, or this conditional use permit would only be valid for 2 years. And this is an image of the property, and site plan shows the driveway. And that concludes my report. If there are any questions.
Thank you, Joy. Any questions of Joy, commissioners? Stand by, Joy. Chair would like to acknowledge the following here representatives of the applicant or the applicant, Annalise Gillette.
You got it right. Most people don't pronounce my name correctly. I appreciate that. Hello, I'm Annalise Gillette Thornton. This is my husband, Ian Thornton. And our property is 1805 Pope Avenue in Norfolk, Virginia, 23509. So I'm sorry, I do have a cold, so I apologize for my voice. But so he bought this house right before we got engaged 2 years ago, and kindly renovated it for me while we were engaged, and then we moved into it as soon as we were married. We lived in it. We love this house. We love Lafayette. We lived in the neighborhood in various rentals for about 3 to 4 years, and just love the neighborhood and the people there, and just want to support the neighborhood in general. When in the spring of 2019, we went on a 2-week tour for my husband's music, and we thought it would be a good idea for supplemental income to maybe put the property on Airbnb. I was hesitant. I love my home. I want people to respect my house, so I was a little bit nervous about it, but we tried it out. And this was before I knew of any regulations needed from the city in regards to Airbnb and short-term rentals. But we tried it out for a 2-week period, and it was incredible. The people who came were extremely kind, and were coming. We had people come for a conference at Norfolk State University, and were extremely complimentary. We had people come for a wedding or a funeral and just needed a place to stay and wanted to be close to family and close to properties where the events were taking place. So we had a great experience, and I immediately started researching, and I wondered, okay, what are the regulations? How can I make sure this is lawful and legal, and what do I need to do to do my due diligence? So I researched a lot, and Hank has been incredible. The whole process has been a little overwhelming, but as it was said, everyone that we've come in contact with here has been extremely helpful, very kind, and I'm very grateful for that, because it can be a little overwhelming. But yes, we've really enjoyed it. We do love our neighborhood, and we thought that it would be a wise financial decision as a young couple to purchase another property in Colonial Place that we plan to move into. We've been renovating it and kind of living in between both, and not extremely excited to move away from Lafayette, but we just feel like it was a wise financial move to have long-term assets. And so we have purchased another property in Colonial Place and are planning to live there full time. And hopefully, if the conditional use permit is passed, we would utilize the Pope Avenue property as a full-time Airbnb. We did go to a Civic League meeting, and we have spoken with different neighbors, some that live on the street that we live on, and some that live, Lafayette is divided by Lafayette Boulevard. And so we've talked to people in Winona and different sections of Lafayette, and some people are really excited about it. The president of the Civic League for Lafayette has an Airbnb himself, has a homestay. We've been registered as a homestay as it's our primary residence still. And so he's in support of short-term rentals in general and was really excited and has one himself. There are several other properties apparently doing Airbnb in the neighborhood, but that have not registered. But we did our due diligence. We went to the Civic League meeting and did get some pushback about parking, about trash, making sure that we have lawn care.
Just general questions for people that just didn't really understand quite what a short-term rental is, or even what Airbnb or VRBO is.
Right. One of the biggest reasons we wanted to do short-term over long-term is because of the wear and tear on the house. We want to take care of the property. It was built in 1927. It needs to be taken care of. And I'm afraid of giving it to a long-term renters who might not be as great of tenants as maybe I would hope they would be. But for the short-term rental, there's little to no damage or wear and tear on the house at all. They're there for maybe 2 nights, and we immediately come. We do the cleaning, we do the flipping, we do all the landscaping, we take the trash out. So it's our responsibility to do all of that. And I've overseen all of that and have been in full communication with each guest. So there. Do you want anything?
Yeah, just the only thing to point out really is, if you can see over here, our driveway runs the entire length of our yard and the entire length of our house. So we have about enough space for about 4 cars to park, which is double what is needed. And we have included in our listing that we do not allow parties, do not allow smoking on the premises, no pets.
There's only 6 guests allowed in the property, and I require them to only park in the driveway, not on the street.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like we have plenty of space, and I would prefer them to use the driveway.
So just like David was saying, our goal is to really introduce people to our beautiful neighborhood and not be an eyesore or a detriment to our neighborhood. We really do want to honor our neighbors and friends and create a place where people can just come and see our city.
Yeah.
And we're available for any questions.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Any questions of Ms. Gillette or Mr. Thornton? Thank you. You folks stand by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here to speak against this application, Carl Runnigan.
Good afternoon. Name's Carl Rannigan. I live at 1740 Pope Avenue. I'm against having this house turned into a short-term rental, mainly because of parking is a concern on that street. It's a small street, and we've had problems with them parking, with the cars that have been parking on there from parties they've had there in the past, where they've blocked up the street in front of my house, across from my house, and around the corner on Jason. So it's a problem with parking, even though they say they're only going to have 6 people in there at a time, and all the cars are going to be in the driveway. Well, I can't very well see the last guy in the driveway wanting 3 other people to move so they can get out. All right, then there's a problem with constantly seeing different faces there, because in terms of block security, the neighbors that are there, we like to know who the person is that's living there and who we see going up and down the street. We've already got a problem with that at the other end of Pope Avenue, because there's a halfway house for mentally handicapped individuals, which are constantly changing personnel in and out of that house. So we're all the time seeing different faces walking up and down the street, so we don't know who's supposed to be there and who isn't supposed to be there. And the other thing is, we don't want this to turn into a party house, to where the noise level goes off the scale because of them having 10 or 15 people in there. So it's not a good situation as far as I'm concerned, and some of the other neighbors. This is a semi-quiet area. We're retired. A lot of us are retired, and we like to keep it that way. And there's no way you can really screen all the bad people out that might show up at that place. So that's pretty much why I'm here to vote against it.
Mr. Rannigan, have you encountered any specific negative issues with this particular property?
Yes, I have. Like I stated, they've had parties there in the past when they was living there full time, and they had cars parked all up and down the street in front of my house and across from my house and around the corner on Jason. And in fact, they've even had two of their cars from people they had living there with them parked in front of the house next to them permanently. If I had lived in that house, I'd have been having some serious words with them about why they're using the front of my house, for their parking. Because they've only got space for one car in front of the house, and they say they got a long driveway, but I've only seen one car in the driveway.
Understood. Any questions of Mr. Rannigan?
I do have one question. Mr. Rannigan, are you a member of your Civic League?
No, I'm not.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Also here to speak against this application, Lisa Billow.
Hi, good afternoon. Okay, I'm Lisa Billow, and I've lived in actually a nitpicking point here. The neighborhood is Gallery Park. The street sign on Tidewater Drive says Gallery Park. We're part of the Lafayette Winona Civic League, but Gallery Park has a different character than Winona or Lafayette Winona.
Ms. Billow, can you give us your mailing address?
Yes, 1720 Blair Avenue.
Go right ahead.
So anyway, I've been there for 25 years, and Gallery Park has a lot of my neighbors who've been there longer than me. And we know each other, we speak to each other, we watch out for each other, we help each other out. And we'd like to maintain that character in our neighborhood. And I don't feel that a short-term business rental is in our best interest in keeping that character. We have rental neighbors, which are part of the community, and they're long-term renters, and that's fine. And if somebody lived at an Airbnb and had a room where they are a resident in the neighborhood, I could see that. But to have a short-term rental of people coming and going, it's a business. It's not an asset to us maintaining and preserving the integrity of our neighborhood. So that is why I object to it. And I really appreciate anything that your commission does to help us preserve our neighborhood and maintain that. We're working to maintain the safety, the cleanliness, the health of it. And that's our goal. We would like to do that. One property comes in and then another one comes in like that, and it's gonna make us vulnerable to not be a residential, old-fashioned traditional neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bello. Appreciate you coming out. Also here to speak against this application, Sylvia Nowling.
Good afternoon. My name is Sylvia Nowling, and I reside at 1813 Pope Avenue, 2 doors from this residence. First, I'm opposed to it. I've appeared before y'all before about an issue on Blair, but I'm back again, and I'm letting you know, if I were in school today, I'm a retired teacher, so if I were in school today, I probably would have failed my math SOL. I told you before, I moved to this area, and I was only going to live there 5 years. That was 1987, okay? And I'm still there. And the reason that I'm there, as Lisa spoke, we are a really old-fashioned neighborhood, okay? If you lived in our neighborhood and you had kids, your kids went outside to play, you would catch Miss Lisa, Mr. Carl, or somebody saying, "Don't be out in that street," We're the kind of folks who look in after our senior citizens, and it is a neighborhood. My concern is that as Gallery Park, as she mentioned, is very different. I am a member and a participating member of our Civic League. I was at the meeting where Annalise and her husband spoke up about it. As a neighbor who's 2 doors down, we all speak together. We knew nothing about this coming up before they even presented the thing. Even with that sign there that's on the post, that sign came down after a couple of days and is now presented all the way back behind their bushes as if you didn't want anyone to see. So that means you have to leave the city street to go onto someone's property to read to see what's there, okay? So it just it just makes me suspect. I'm against it because, again, like I said, this was presented to our Civic League. There was a lot of pushback, and I was one of those with the pushback. I live by myself. I feel safe there by myself, as a lot of our members do. Carl mentioned that we're a neighborhood of retired people, but we have young people, and we've welcomed them in, as I did Annalise and her husband. But the same point is, we want to have a neighborhood, not a business in our neighborhood. We want to stay there. I would hope that the young people who are there think that they might want to stay there, and their 5 years may turn into more than 5 years. But I just feel that it's all of these different folks who come in and out and in and out. You never know. I know when I see someone strange at Carl's house or Lisa's house or our next probably speaker, Tony's house, what should or should not be there. Not that I'm minding their business, but it's just a matter of safety. You're in a familiar setting. You're surrounded by familiar people. Not that people don't come up and down, but just when you have someone who is so close, and our lots are only 50 feet wide. Okay, so you have people coming, going, park, and as Carl said, they park always, even they do. They park one car in the street, one car in the driveway. And just maybe a couple weeks ago, a guy is outside working on a vehicle. You know, this is not a car lot or a car maintenance place. You know, I'm just in opposition. If you want to live there or do as the previous person said, and you rent it out in the summertime, but it's your main residence, but don't make our area a business. We like to keep it residential for people who want to be there and be part of a community, and it's a great community, all right? And I love being in Norfolk, I love being in Gallery Park, and I think this is what neighborhoods are about, and everyone who comes to our neighborhood say, wow, you live in Norfolk and it's like this? And they really like it. And I've had friends who have actively moved to the neighborhood, you know, just because they want to be a part of something that they figure is great.
Thank you, Ms. Nolly.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, Ms. Nolly,
Ms.
sure.
Natalie, the sign there in the picture, are you saying that sign is no longer?
Oh, no, it's not there. It's
in the yard, but
okay, may I?
move it to the side.
It's right.
You could see it in that.
Excuse me, sir. This,
Okay. Okay, excuse me.
Ms.
This
Gillette,
sign right
please.
here is all the way back over here, and for the last 2 weeks, it's been leaning forward. So if you want to see the sign, okay, because now I walk every day, so I didn't see the sign. Someone had to tell me about the sign. And if you want to see it, you have to go there, kind of pull it up and whatever. So you don't know what kind of sign it is. It could be one of those signs that they have, that the yellow signs, everyone says, you know, children are playing or something like that. But it has been removed from there. Actually, one of our neighbors called downtown to ask why was the sign removed. But it has been removed and it's stuck back in the back. So it makes me ask, what are you hiding? You know, why can't the public see it?
Yeah, thank you. And then my question is for staff. Who posts these signs?
Staff posts the signs, and to probably the next question, no, we do not give permission for those signs to be moved.
So to that, then, the sign should remain there for how long, George?
It's posted and it should remain through the consideration by the city council.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Mr. Houchins, for bringing that up. Finally, here in opposition to this application, Mr. Anthony Judge.
Good afternoon, I'm Anthony Judge. My address is 1746 Pope Avenue. I've been there for the last 40 years. And I'm in opposition because it's always been a neighborhood where, you know, where our children grew up. It's always been a peaceful neighborhood. We don't have a whole lot of, you know, stuff going on. But, you know, but lately, you know, we've been getting a lot of traffic in the area. And I know they said that they have a driveway, but they haven't been parked in the driveway. In fact, they were parked right on the corner. And if I'm not mistaken, you're supposed to be 12 feet from the corner. It was right on the corner. So if you're trying to turn off adjacent onto Pope, you couldn't even see. In fact, one morning, the school bus, the yellow school bus, wasn't able to make the turn because the car was parked right on the corner. And it took about 5 or 6 backing up, pulling forward, backing up for that bus to make that turn. And so then I really was opposed to it. And then also, as Sylvia was saying, in fact, I was the one that saw the sign gone because I've been trying to read the sign for the longest. And then finally, when I went to go read it, it was gone. And then it was way back, like she said, way back in the yard somewhere. And then it was down. In fact, I think I erased it, but I had some pictures of it with it laying down. And so we didn't even know anything about it until we saw the sign up there, what was going on. So, that was my opposition of it. And so if you have any questions for me.
Yes, sir, I do. You described a situation where the school bus couldn't make the turn.
Yes, sir.
The car that was blocking the school bus, was that car aligned with the property of Mr. Gillette and Mr. Thornton?
It was right on the corner, and it was people that were in that house, and they were parked on that corner, and that bus wasn't able to make that turn. In fact, I thought it was going to be a problem. I thought, the person that was driving the bus would probably have made a complaint, that they couldn't get by, but I guess they didn't.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Judge, commissioners? Thank you, sir.
All right.
We're in the rebuttal phase now. Ms. Gillette, Mr. Thornton, you folks have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Just pulling up some notes I made real quick. Yeah, I think one thing I want to apologize for, we were under the impression that, and I think my wife said we found this out from Hank, we could have been wrong, and I take responsibility for that. But we were under the impression that we could move the sign to a place. This is a short-term rental currently, and we're here to comply, a homestay. So as you can see, in this exact picture, 1, the sign is directly in front of the house, and 2, where it is now, you can see it in this picture. So we didn't put it in the backyard, we didn't put it behind even any of these bushes. You can see that bush line. We put the sign with some metal stakes into the ground right there to prop up so it can be seen, but it wouldn't be as much of an eyesore for guests that could come in.
And it did fall a couple times. Every time I went to the property, I propped it back up and I stuck it back in the ground freshly because I didn't want anyone to think that we were hiding anything, but I didn't also want it to be an eyesore. And I also knew that everyone within a 300-foot radius, I think, was going to get mailed also about the hearing publicly. So, but I would prop it back up every time we were there.
And so in general, I know you guys are dealing with this a lot. This is a very new thing. And I know the city and the communities, we're trying to figure out what to do. So there's a new thing that's happening all over our city right now. I would say the majority of all Airbnbs and short-term rentals are operating illegally in our city. And what we have is we have a lot of people with no intent on ever coming here to present to you guys, never any intent to present to their civic league, never any intent to do it the legal way. In fact, we talked to Sully and Callahan, who did the closing on our new house, and they said they're representing people that are literally, they're aware that if they ever get a fine, they can leave that LLC behind and start a new one. So just all to say, we've gone through a 5 to 6 month process to do it the right way. And if it's not able to be done the right way, in our neighborhood even, people will probably do it the wrong way. And it'll actually make the market saturated only by those willing to break the law instead of those willing to comply to it. So first off, before we do anything else, just if you have anything else you would like for us to comply to, we will gladly do it. We will put it in our listing. We will do whatever's right. As far as they were talking about some of the parking on the street, some parties, my wife and I, the only party we really ever hosted in this home was our engagement party. And I think that was what some of them were referring to when I lived here with 2 roommates before we were married. I would park in the driveway, and as many of you know, probably in your own home, it can be a hassle to wake somebody up to pull out of your own driveway in the morning. I think a lot of those issues were things we really experienced when you live there as a full-time resident or as even a full-time renter. Whereas our neighbors directly next to us let us know very courteously when they're gonna have a raging party. And they're like, well, we just wanted to let you guys know, but the renters, and like my wife was saying, we want to have less wear and tear on our property, less wear and tear on our neighborhood. I even know Sylvia's been an incredible neighbor to us. I know this is like coming against her a little bit, but she's given us gardening tips, introduced us to Ronnie, who does like all the mowing on the street and we have incredible neighbors, and we really don't want to be, we aren't against them, and we don't really want to be. But even Sylvia, we've had conversations with her where she had a time where she went overseas and she rented out her unit, and the renters came in and she told us about how the fleas were stuck in between every single floorboard from their animals. And just, we've never rented a property before. And we're kind of almost a little bit more scared on like getting a bad renter for an entire year as opposed to a short-term rental where people are just coming in to visit,
We'll
So
do it. If it means that we should do a long-term rental instead of a short-term rental, we'll do it. For the sake of the neighborhood, we'll do it. Like, if that's what needs to be done, we care more about the neighborhood and our neighbors than we do about a business. That's not our heart. So at the end of the day, we've done our due diligence, and we'll lay it all down if people are against it. So
So just to kind of finally just wrap it up, we'd just love to do it the right way. Let us know if there's anything we can comply to, if there's anything we should add to our listing. Like even David was saying, this is just a way for us. We're both in ministry full time at First Presbyterian Church down the street in Ghent, and we don't want to hurt our friends or our neighborhood. We honestly, we're just trying to have a little side business that can help us as a family do the things that we feel called to do.
Thank you, folks. Any questions?
Yeah, we have any questions?
Ms. Gillette, Mr. Thornton, commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you.
Your opposition has the same right. Mr. Rannigan, anything you'd like to add, or anyone on your side like to add? Ms. Nowling, Mr. Judge?
5 minutes collectively.
Total of 5 minutes.
I really don't have anything other to add to what I had previously stated, but we just don't want to have a commercial setting there and with a possibility of multiple people coming into that house through the year. If they need a rental property, they need to do it as a yearly rental like normal other rental properties are done, or just sell a house altogether and put it up for a single family unit, so it matches the rest of the houses and couples that are already there. It's if people need some place to stay, we got plenty of fine motels and hotels in the city of Norfolk that they can go use, and they got waterside they can go to have their parties. We just don't want this place to turn into a party house.
Thank you, Mr. Rannigan.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Nowling?
I just want to say that, again, I'm against it. They're right. I love them as neighbors, and we do have young neighbors. However, our renters have only had one party, the ones next door to me, and I had to tell them as 25-year-olds, their parties are quieter than mine. Okay, so, and they are. But I just want to say my difference is in renting my house. My husband and I went overseas. We were overseas for 3 years. It's a difference when you rent your home to one person who will stay there for 3 years. Yes, I had an unfortunate incident with fleas, but those fleas were there they were residents, they had a lease and a long-term lease, and the people who rented my house and their fleas, okay, were a part of the community, okay? They were part of the community. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nowling. Ms. Bello, Mr. Judge, anything either of you like to add? Commissioners, any comment?
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
You want to go first?
Well, the only comment I'd like to make, I'm not sure that the requirement to post hasn't been compromised. Oh.
I don't think it's
Is that better?
I don't know if you're on. You on?
I don't see a light, but I can talk a little louder. I'm not sure that the requirement to post the hearing hasn't been compromised, and if not, maybe we should continue this for 30 days or so, not only just to fill the requirement of the hearing being posted, but also to give the neighbors and the owners some time to kind of talk this thing out. To the neighbors, I want to thank you all for coming forward. You're obviously presenting both sides of this issue, and it is a relatively new ordinance. It's been in place less than a year, and we've got homeowners on both sides, and we do want to do what's best for not just your neighborhood, but also for our city. You may see that there may be more control by having a 2-year look at who's coming in this house rather than someone coming and staying for a full year. You may stand firm and say, no, that's not what we want for our neighborhood. But if nothing else, I just want to ask Chair and staff if not the requirement to post has not been compromised.
Well, it certainly seems like it to me. I guess George and Adam could speak to that more definitively. I think there is a requirement that sign stay prominently visible wherever staff posts it until the application is ultimately decided at the city council level. Is that correct, Adam?
I know that the requirement is that the item needs to be posted at the property. I actually thought for a moment that it had been moved because it actually is not on the property in the picture. The lamp post or power pole is actually in the public right-of-way.
Yes.
So it may be in front of the property, and actually putting it on the property might have been more in compliance with the ordinance. But suffice it to say, if staff posted it, it was posted. I don't think we specifically say exactly how long it has to be visible and how visible. So I wouldn't say that based on the information provided at the hearing that the posting requirement was not complied with. But that's not to say that a continuance is inappropriate for other reasons.
Sure.
If I may-
Thank you, Adam. Yes, ma'am.
If I may add, it seems to me that you have a very good neighborhood situation, that you know each other. And what you might benefit from in taking more time is that it's a larger discussion and you can really come to some understanding of how you perceive the situation and how it may work or not work in the future. So, I would be inclined to support your having another 30 days to really discuss it among yourselves.
Any other comment?
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Which may be moot, but are there any, one question is, can this be a long-term rental by right?
Yes.
Yes, it can.
Okay. And my other question is, are there any parking restrictions? I heard a lot about parking in front of certain houses. Are there any parking restrictions on the street?
No, I'm not aware that this is not a residential parking zone. Is that what you were talking about?
That's what I was asking, yeah.
I think she's asking, like similar to Longwood.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
like my neighborhood has residential
correct.
parking restrictions. That's what I was
I think
wondering.
the city does have somewhere buried a rule about how close to an intersection you can park to prevent the issue
Clearly,
that the gentleman
yes.
described
Yeah.
with the turning radius.
Yeah. I just was curious if there was an actual permitted parking or no parking on one side of the street, but it sounds like it's parking on either side and catch as catch can. Is that, okay. Those are my only two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Any other question or comment at this time?
It seems to me that both the applicant who presented their position quite well and those against it presented their position quite well. I don't know what the benefit of delaying the vote is. So I'm inclined to take action today to the benefit of both sides so that we can move forward.
I agree with Commissioner Murphy too. I don't see the benefit of 30 days coming to different conclusions on this. I appreciate you coming forward with things. I think there's, ways things have always been done, and there's ways that things are going to be done going forward in the future. And change is tough, but we have to accommodate some change. Sometimes change is better. It brings new people to the neighborhood. Maybe they'll love your neighborhood. Maybe they'll be wonderful people. Maybe they'll buy a house in your neighborhood. Maybe they'll fix it up and raise your property values. The change is not always bad, and I tend to be a bit more progressive, and I think that those who are coming to get compliance deserve the opportunity. You say this is 2 years. This is not forever. There are restrictions. They are on the map. We do follow these properties much more so than we do others. I find short-term rentals to be less burden on properties than long-term rentals there. You get a short-term person in, maybe not everyone is is exactly what you would want, but most of them are. And you get a long-term renter in there who's not taking care of a property, it's much more of a nuisance to the community. So I agree with Mr. Murphy that I personally don't see a reason to continue this. I don't have an issue with the notification of the posting. Our council has said that there's nothing there's nothing that keeping us from moving forward, and I don't believe anything was done maliciously on either side.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. Any other comment, commissioners? Question? Susan?
The motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit subject to the conditions contained in the ordinance, draft ordinance. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
I just, for the record, I want to say that I'm very much in support of change. I think that short-term rentals, in some cases, are going to be of a benefit to the property owners. I'm very much an advocate of property owner rights, but in this situation, I think the process has been compromised. I'd hate to see that this becomes a regular occurring event, and for that matter, I'm going to have to vote no.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley?
Aye. We make that recommendation to council. I want to thank all of those folks who came out today as well. I understand, as Joy did in her presentation, we have a 2-year window on all of these short-term rental conditional use permits. In that time, of course, we're going to be monitoring, the neighbors are going to be monitoring, and hopefully at the end of that time, we'll get a better sense as to whether or not we're in a stronger position to allow that CUP to continue, or whether we need to take some corrective action. Like Mr. Houchins, I too have some trepidation about short-term rentals. It is a new concept for our city. I don't want to say we're winging it, but we certainly are getting a better feel for how this can impact communities. The last thing we would want to see is for these types of activities to have a deleterious impact on surrounding property values. That's something we have to monitor, and that's one of the purposes that we have the 2-year moratorium. That's not a good term, but the 2-year window of opportunity with each one of these CUPs. So we will make that recommendation to council. We will be monitoring, and we will be asking and looking forward to the rest of the neighbors to keep us apprised of what transpires as these things go forward. So we wish you the best. We'll make that recommendation to council, and we'll move forward. Susan?
Okay. The next item, number 7, Robert Huntoon for a conditional use permit to allow an accessory dwelling unit at 531 New Jersey Avenue. The purpose of this request is to allow the construction of an accessory dwelling unit.
So applicant would like to add a 500 square foot extension onto his home. Because it will have its own door leading to the outside, kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom, it is classified by the zoning code as an accessory dwelling unit, which requires a conditional use. Our first slide shows an aerial of the subject property. It is located on the south side of New Jersey Avenue between Colonial and Newport Avenue in the Colonial Place Riverview neighborhood. It is zoned single-family traditional. While the house is not in a local historic district, it is recognized as a contributing structure to the national recognized Colonial Place Historic District. And here you see a side view of the house. And along the side is where the applicant wants to add his accessory dwelling unit. They do intend to use it as an in-law suite. Here we see elevations, and pointed on the elevations are where the expansion is proposed. The site does meet ADU, accessory dwelling unit zoning requirements, including setbacks and a number of required off-street parking spaces. The site needs to have 3 in all, 2 for the primary home and then 1 more additional for the accessory dwelling unit. The applicant's site survey does show an existing driveway that measures over 60 feet, which is sufficient to accommodate the parking needs of 3 cars. City landscape architect did require that the homeowner plant 1 tree in the backyard. The Civic League did review this application, and they expressed no opposition to it. One other caveat, I'm sorry, I can't remember Mr. Dean's title at this time.
No, I don't know what
His official title.
I think
The-
he's rehabilitation and design specialist or some senior, something to that effect, yeah.
Mr. Dean Cooper, associate of ours, who reviews homes, did review these plans and he approved it. And that concludes my report.
Joy, what was the Civic League feedback? I missed that.
No opposition.
Thank you. Any questions of Joy, Commissioners? Thank you. The chair acknowledges that there is no opposition to this application. We want to acknowledge Robert L. Hunton, excuse me, sir. You don't need to feel compelled to speak to us unless you just want to, sir.
No, it's just because we want to add a kitchen.
Thank you for that, sir. Ms. Hunt. Thank you, Susan.
The motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit subject to the conditions contained in the draft ordinance. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley?
Aye. We'll make that recommendation to council. Good luck.
Okay, item number 8 on your agenda, Curtis Bay Medical Waste Services, Virginia LLC for a conditional use permit to allow storage of hazardous materials at 3634 Village Avenue. The purpose of this request is to allow the operation of a medical waste transfer facility.
Good afternoon. Fix that. So this request comes from Curtis Bay Medical Waste Services of Virginia for the property located at 3634 Village Avenue. The site is currently occupied by a flooring company, and the applicant is proposing to use 75% of the warehousing space as a medical waste transfer facility while keeping 25% for the flooring company. The site is zoned BCI for Business and Commerce Park Industrial, and the conditional use permit is to allow the storage of hazardous materials. This proposed use is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates the site as industrial and identifies the Norfolk Industrial Park as a strategic economic development area in the city. There are several other medical waste companies that operate in Norfolk, and there is a solid waste transfer center that's located a mile away from this proposed facility, so it would be in keeping with the surrounding uses in the area. So Curtis Bay is currently operating in Norfolk, but they're just proposing to move their transfer facility from North Carolina to Norfolk in order to be closer to their clients. So their truck routes use primarily arterial roads and access the site from East Princess Anne Road and East Virginia Beach Boulevard. The facility would receive medical waste from hospitals, funeral homes, doctor's offices, nursing facilities, clinics, and pharmacies located within the region, and then transfer those items for treatment and disposal in facilities located outside the region in Virginia and Maryland and up and down the Mid-Atlantic. The facility would have a security system with cameras that monitor the interior and exterior of the facility, and the proposed facility would handle only regulated medical waste and non-hazardous pharmaceutical waste that is packed in accordance with the with Department of Transportation regulations. So regulated medical waste is also known as biohazardous waste, and that usually can include bodily fluids and other potentially infectious materials. And non-hazardous pharmaceutical waste is usually over-the-counter medications, antibiotics, hormones, and non-RCRA prescription medication. So it will not be permitted to handle what's considered to be hazardous waste or Resource Conservation and Recovery Act waste. So in order to be considered this type of, I'm saying waste a lot, in order to be considered this type of waste, it has to exhibit one of 4 characteristics. That's ignitability, corrosivity, reactivity, or toxicity. So what's being stored in this warehouse would not be exhibiting any of these characteristics. So the idea is that the already packed waste would arrive to the facility in a 26-foot box truck, be weighed on a scale and then loaded back onto a truck and to be transported out of Norfolk. The majority of materials are transferred within 24 hours, and the longest that it would be stored would be 72 hours over the weekend. So given the proposed site improvements like striping the parking lot and adding landscaping and a sidewalk, and that Plan Norfolk 2030 designates this as a strategic economic development area in the city, staff is recommending approval subject to the conditions in the staff report. I could stand by for some questions.
Hank, in my limited knowledge of medical waste, I understand that there are broadly 4 types of medical waste: general, infectious, hazardous, and radioactive. Radioactive already has its own disposal protocols. You've already mentioned in your presentation the no hazardous waste here.
Correct.
So we're looking at general medical waste and some infectious medical waste.
It will be handling what's called regulated medical waste and then pharmaceutical waste and non-hazardous pharmaceutical waste.
Okay. All right. Now, are there other operators like these folks in our city now?
Yes. When I was doing research, I came across at least 3 or 4 other companies that are operating in Norfolk as well.
Okay. And their move from Moyock to Norfolk is just a strategic, logistical move.
Yes.
To cut to the quick, Moyock didn't run them out.
I don't believe the Moyock ran them out. I'm pretty sure that it's just a logistical move to be closer to their clients.
Yeah. Well, the applicant's here. I'm sure he's going to
Yes, I'm sure he can answer those questions a little bit better.
Thank you, Hank.
All right,
Any
thank you.
questions of Mr. Morrison, commissioners? Thank you, Hank. Chair acknowledges the applicant, Evan August.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Commission. Evan August, 1501 South Clinton Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21224. Thank you for your consideration today. Mr. Morrison has been absolutely fantastic work through, I wouldn't say a real lengthy process, but a very detailed process, which is good. Mentioned the improvements to the building. We worked closely with Christy Fisher with Parks and Recreation. So it's an older building. The industrial park, it will kind of stand out now because with several trees, lots of bushes, lots of shrubbery. I actually have one question. We will be putting in the sidewalk. On the left side, there's about 120 feet that we'll be putting the sidewalk. On the right side of the driveway, there's a smaller grass area. It's about 50 feet, maybe a little less, but it stops right at a railroad track. And then there's also a utility pole right there. So I would just need clarification if we need to go this side of it or that side of it, because there's really nothing past the railroad track on that.
I'm going to be greedy, and I'm going to tell you both sides. And you can work with Hank through Public Works folks, and they can help accommodate you to make sure we get those utilities either relocated or at least allow you what options you may have in order to complete the extension of that sidewalk across your property.
Absolutely.
I speak out of turn? Okay, good.
Nope.
All right. And I just to clarify my own curiosity, this is just a logistical move, a more efficient move on the part of your enterprise as opposed to Moyock being unhappy with your presence there.
No, absolutely. So in Moyock, we're actually in a transfer yard. North Carolina is actually even a little different. We actually don't even need a permit through DEQ like we will here, there. But we've grown. Our biggest customer in the area is Centera Healthcare System. This is a little closer. This will provide a building a lot better, a little more efficient. It's a little closer to our main facility for processing in Virginia, is in Petersburg. We actually do operate the only licensed independent facility in Virginia. And then we have another facility in Roanoke, North Carolina, or Roanoke, Virginia.
Now, Centera, of course, you mentioned is one of your customers. The Bonds Accord system, you handle medical waste from them as well?
Some sites.
Okay.
Actually, hoping to pick up one in Richmond that we're working on right now.
And Riverside Medical Center, Chesapeake Regional Medical Center.
Do not have that.
Don't have that.
No.
And I was just curious as to how broad your service would be relative to the medical providers we have here. Do you also pick up from urgent care facilities and doctors' offices, if you will?
Anybody that, as you guys were discussing earlier, different types of regulated medical waste. The one that people wouldn't think of would be a tattoo parlor. If they properly dispose of their sharps after doing a tattoo, that's got to go somewhere. Small clinics, urgent cares. You have sharps that are properly packaged in a sharps container. Red bag waste would be the non-professional term for it, would be gauze, bandages, things like that. Everything that we move now is anywhere from a small box to we have what's called RBX, or a bulk outer packaging. It's the size of a compactor,
Right.
which that
And
wouldn't be coming there.
When you folks come to pick it up at the various facilities, it's already boxed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Or the generator, actually, it's regulatory. They have to package it. We're not allowed to package it for them.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair acknowledges that there is no opposition to this application. Susan?
The motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions contained in the draft ordinance. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Yes.
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley.
Aye, we'll make that recommendation to council. Good luck.
Okay. Item number 9, Hadi Mahul for a conditional use permit at 6586 Tidewater Drive, Suites I and J, to operate a commercial recreation center. The purpose of this request is to allow the operation of a commercial recreation center.
So this request comes from Mr. Hadi Mahul for a conditional use permit at 6586 Tidewater Drive in Suites I and J. The property is located in the Tidewater Shops on the southeast corner of Tidewater Drive and Region Road. Suites I and J are currently vacant, but it was formerly occupied by a pet store. The applicant is proposing to operate a commercial recreation center. The site is zoned CC for community commercial, and a CUP is required to have more than 4 game machines. The applicant is proposing to have 35 of the games of skill machines. They're not proposing any sale of alcohol or tobacco or vape products. The proposed use is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates this site as commercial. And the proposed hours for operation are from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. 7 days a week. And the applicant would have to meet with the Mayor's Committee on Gaming prior to the City Council's final decision on this matter. There are 50 parking spaces in the shopping center, and using the current parking standards in the zoning ordinance, a shopping center of this size would require 69 parking spaces. So the site is underparked currently. But under current zoning regulations, no additional parking is required for existing buildings when uses change from one to another with an equal or lesser parking requirement. So commercial recreation centers have the same parking requirement as general retail, and that's 1 space per 250 square feet. So technically, there's no new additional parking required. But if this were a new development, that would require 8 new parking spaces for this 2,000 square foot space. Staff did receive a letter of support from the Coronado Inglenook Civic League on December 5th, and we also sent a notice to the Green Hill Farm Civic League on January 9th. As part of this conditional use permit, the applicant would be required to plant 7 new trees along Tidewater Drive in the landscaping beds. So you can see in those photos, there's some gaps where trees used to be that have since died. So he'll be replacing those as part of this. And so given that the proposal meets Norfolk's current land use requirements, it's located in a commercial node on Tidewater Drive. It's supported by the Civic League, and games of skill are currently permitted in Norfolk as well as the Commonwealth of Virginia. Staff is recommending approval of this conditional use permit, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Hank.
Yes.
Any questions of Mr. Morrison, commissioners? Thanks, Hank.
Thank you.
Stand by. Chair acknowledges the applicant, Hadi McCool.
Yes.
Hi everybody, my name is Harry McCool. I reside at 500 Barry Torch Street in Norfolk, Virginia 23510.
Anything you'd like to add, sir? Or tell us about your application?
Yes, I have a restaurant, Some to Eat, in the same shopping center, few units down, and I have like 2 skill gaming machines. Our customers like them, and I wanted to put more, but I didn't want to shrink the dining area to put more games. So I noticed that there was a vacant unit, a few units down, and that's what I thought it was like be a good, place to put more machines for our customers.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McCool, have you looked at your parking circumstance there? I go by there quite frequently at all times of the day and night, and it seems to be always a full parking lot there. With the addition of 35 additional machines and the personnel that you would probably have to address those machines, do you foresee that there's going to be a parking problem?
I don't think so, because there's plenty of space. There's room on both sides of the shopping center. There's a lot of like room, and also like our customers, they're gonna be coming more like in the afternoon. The place right next to us is Lindy's restaurant. They have breakfast and lunch, but they close early. The other place is a phone, like a Metro PCS phone. They don't have like a lot of customers. And the other 2 places, there's one place that she fixes shoes and stuff. She doesn't have a lot of customers. We don't have like a lot of customers. Like I think we should be fine. There's a lot of room for parking in that shopping center.
You and I must be looking at 2 different locations. We were by there at 2:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday. It was packed. I was by there at 8:15 last evening. It was packed.
Some parking lots.
I'm a regular lottery ticket player. I go to Angel Food Market frequently.
Oh.
It's very often, it's difficult for me. I had to come back because I can't find a spot. So I say that, I don't know what you're talking about on the sides.
We have like the one at the corner, they closed down. It was the cash or credit card, gift card cash place. They closed down, and so that is vacant. There's another unit that is vacant. And first come, first serve. There's a lot of like parking lots in Norfolk that, like you have to have businesses, but like people find ways to park. What can we do? Like we cannot. There's no way to expand the parking lot. Sometimes that's the situation everywhere.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
As far as parking lot.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. McCool, commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Susan.
Okay, the motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions contained in.
Susan, let me interrupt you. And let me speak to the commissioners. We got 2 applications before us today for commercial recreation centers. The one we just heard is for a strip mall, and the other one is also for a strip mall up in Highland Springs area of Colley Avenue. If those types of locations are going to be magnets for these types of businesses, mightn't we want to take some time, commissioners, to look at how we can address this parking? We've heard from this application, they got 50 spaces, 35 machines. That's just one business. I know that the food market also has 4 machines. He's indicated he's got 4 others. And we got businesses that operate into the night. To me, it seems that we're adding additional layers on the cake that can't fit in the pan. Might we want to consider the possibility of continuing these so that we can at least try to match better what's being asked in the application with what type of facilities would be available for them to have the opportunity to accommodate their customers? I just asked a rhetorical question. Matt?
I think, to me, it's a bigger issue. To me, it's a land use issue.
Okay.
Let's call these what they are. They're gambling facilities. We know that city council at the moment is holding on to them, waiting some legal results that are going on around the state, as if these machines are allowed or not. We also know the mayor has got, I'm sorry. The mayor has got, the mayor has a committee studying it. I don't think that we know as a city what we want, how many of these, where do we want them from a land use standpoint? Many do we want? Where do we want to run the city? How do we want to govern them? As far as I'm concerned, if city council is going to hold on to them, we should postpone all of this and give planning staff a chance to study the issue and give us good recommendations that we can give the city council when we pass these up. Right now, what's going to happen is we're going to pass up, we've already passed, I think, two more now. Could be 5 more next month, could be 10 more the following month. They're all going to sit there, and what's going to happen, I'm afraid, is that the backlog's going to come through, and city council's not going to know what's what, and we don't have a recommendation for them. I don't think we're doing our job properly by setting them up waiting to see what city council has without doing a good study on the issue. I'd rather kick it down 120 days, 150 days, whatever the answer is, to give planning time to go study it and come up with a good recommendation I have my opinion, but I'm just one guy. We should study it, give good recommendations to city council so that when the logjam does pass through, there is at least some recommendation from planning commission.
And I would say when we passed the one on Little Creek Road, there was opposition in the neighborhood about parking, but because there was no standard, I mean, the staff report here says that they're still in a preliminary phase about recommending a standard. I mean, George and Susan can speak to this, but we are kind of blindly doing this. We did it with opposition on Little Creek Road. I don't remember how council dispensed with that one, but I understand where you're coming from. I mean, we don't have an actual parking requirement that's different from a regular commercial requirement.
Well, we are bringing, we did allow these applications to come through. They do meet our current land use guidelines. These are our guidelines. I would be comfortable saying that we take a position now that we're not going to, accept or entertain any more applications going forward while we examine this. But is it fair for us to have the rules in place and have applications come through, meet our current land use guidelines, have staff recommendation, and us not say, under the current rules that we've put forward, let's move this forward. Council still has to look at this. It still has to make the approval. But I do agree that we need to look at it. But I would favor saying that we consider the applications that are here under the current book of rules we have, with the understanding that we're going to take a solid look at this at our level, because it is a much bigger issue. And moving forward, leave this to council on these handful that we have now. But we're only going by the guidelines that we have in place. So I would be comfortable to entertain these two now, but certainly put it out there that our position is that best not entertain any further.
Comment?
Yes, I would just ask, staff talks about that you've received concerns, and there needs to be, they're currently investigating where there's a better method of determining the parking requirements for this type of use. I mean, not to put you on the spot, but I mean, if you had 120 days, could you do that, or 30 days? Or is it just a matter of, we have to see some of these things and how they operate before we can really come up with a standard?
Mr. Chairman, may I answer that question?
Absolutely.
We have let me try this again. We have at the staff level contracted to have some extensive research done on the parking requirements that are being applied across the country to facilities that have these kinds of machines. We've provided you with the preliminary data. The final report is due to us in 45 days. It would probably take us at least another 45 days to do the analysis and begin the process of trying to put those rules into place. And so, 120 days, I think, would be a very appropriate time frame, and we should very well be able to have the information that you're looking for with respect to parking. What we are finding in the preliminary or in preliminary indications is that we are dramatically under parking this type of facility.
Yes, sir, Kevin.
I agree with my fellow commissioners that we need to continue to look at this and develop the standard. But I don't see the need to delay this vote. I have enough information on this application to make a decision. And a lot of it's based on our field trips. And just because, I'll leave it at that. But rather than, I think that by taking a position, it will be more instructive to council than not taking a position.
You're speaking from the parking issue or from the land use issue? I think there's a land, I think we need to engage the community and say, do we want to have these come up, like, we're headed towards convenience stores.
Right.
Gambling facilities being as many as convenience stores. Is that what we want to see around our city? And that's where we're headed. And if the Paceys are coming in, they're just going to speed up. So, I think there's a parking issue for sure, but there's also the discussion of a land use issue, which is, is that what we want to see?
Yeah, and I think my comments would remain the same, that we're being more instructive by taking a position.
Any further comment, question with regard to this application? Susan?
So, if clarify, if you want to continue, then one of you all will have to make a motion to do so. If we go to Susan, it's to vote on the application.
Vote on this application.
Thank you, George. We got it. No, I got it.
You want to make a motion, Mr. Hales?
No, I'll hold off to the next mid-month meeting. We'll have a discussion and figure out what's the right thing to do. I mean, these two are not the issue. It's the 5 behind this one and the 6 behind that one and the 7 behind that one. And how long do we how many do we pass up before we say, stop, let's go study the issue, and give people fair notice. We're putting a stop on these for 120 days until we can go do a complete study of the issue and know what we're passing up.
Well, I think it's fair to say we probably won't pass up more than 2 with a recommendation before we look at this, is my sense on it, but there are 2 in front of us at this point. To pass up, we're not saying we're passing it up positively or negatively, we're just gonna act on what's on the table, would be my feeling.
Well, now, if the commission is of a mind to not consider this application favorably, let me ask the applicant, would you want to continue this until such time as we've had the opportunity to get the benefit of the parking analysis?
I would be glad to do whatever needs to be done to make things right, pretty much.
Okay. As the chair, I do have a latitude to make a motion, do I not?
You do.
Let me just make a motion so that we can clearly air this and move forward. I would like to see a motion where we continue this and those these 2 current applications for 120 days until such time as we have the benefit of the parking study that is forthcoming to our staff.
Okay, I'm going to call the roll. Ms. Austin?
Has it been seconded?
Need a second.
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
No.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
No.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley?
Aye.
So the motion carries, it continues.
The motion is carried 5-2 in favor of continuance of 120 days on this application, as well as the
Well, I don't know if we can consider both together. We weren't considering.
Yeah, we have to do that. That's right. We got to do one at a time. Is that correct?
That's correct. And just for the record, the 120 days, it'll be whatever the public hearing
May
is.
28th, yeah.
Okay, thank you. For May.
Item number 10, Susan.
Okay, item number 10 is the Kali Shop for the following conditional use permits at 4800 Kali Avenue, Unit A and B. A for a convenience store, B for a commercial recreation center, and C for the smoking of vaping products, for the sale of smoking or vaping products. The purpose of these requests is to allow the operation of a convenience store with amusement or gaming devices and sale of tobacco product.
David?
Good afternoon again. So our site here, as discussed, is Kali Shop at 4800 Kali Avenue, Unit A and B, which is on the east side of Kali Avenue and north side of 48th Street. And Norfolk Air calls it the North Kali neighborhood. We have an existing use of commercial. My sense is there's a license for one retail store, tobacco, but it's somewhat dormant. The only other active use is the, is it Maziki's restaurant? Is in there. And they got just an aside, they got a conditional use permit some time ago, so the landscaping on that site is somewhat current. So we're looking to operate a convenience store with amusement or gaming devices and the sale of tobacco products. The site is zoned CC, Community Commercial, and is also in the Coastal Resilience Overlay District. So the hours of operations would be 9 to 9 Sunday through Thursday and 9 to 11 Friday and Saturday. I don't have anything in writing from neighbors. From the Highland Park Civic League, I have a conversation where they were expressing concerns, and we're going to meet, I believe, on February 13th and make a formal recommendation. The applicant has met with them, but at the time of the meeting, there was no recommendation made either way.
David, how many machines are they gonna have in this commercial recreation center?
They are proposing 16 machines.
And with the 16 machines, I understand there are multiple stations at each machine?
I would have to defer to the applicant on that. I know those exist. I've heard of that, but in this instance, they weren't that specific.
Okay.
And as Hank said earlier, there is a concern on parking, and that was one of the principal concerns I got in phone calls, was parking, and you may hear from somebody today on that. The current requirement is 1 space per 300 square feet, and as such, 4 parking spaces are required for these 16 gaming, because it's a square footage calculation and not a gaming machine calculation.
How many parking spaces are on that site now, David?
I believe there are 24 total, and as such, when we plugged in the restaurant, the convenience store, and the amusement. The commercial recreation center, they are at capacity. They just made it at 24. And what helped them is you only count the public areas, so the kitchen in the restaurant didn't count against them. So. Plan Norfolk 2030 designates the property as suburban, so the use is consistent with that. And staff is recommending approval if the conditions outlined in the report are met. Some specific conditions were that a generator would go along as required by the ordinance for the convenience store, and that the parking spaces be restriped. A site visit showed them to be somewhat faded. The trash handling area on the right side of the building would be screened with a 6-foot masonry wall. We also had a concern about signage, and I can report that as of yesterday, all the cigarette advertising signs had been removed.
So they're now in compliance with the 50% transparency rule.
We didn't go the
It's not a
transparency rule.
transparency, it's the amount of signage they're allowed to have in their
It's
windows, so
those,
they are in compliance.
those vinyl signs,
Yes.
you know, Cool Cigarettes, Marlboro, and such. We asked them to remove those.
Okay, I'm with you.
And stand by
Thank
for
you,
any
sir.
questions you may
Any
have.
question of Mr. Bowling? Thank you, Dave.
All right, thank you.
Chair acknowledges the applicant of this application, Derek Donham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Derek Donham. I live at 1401 Waterlawn Avenue in Chesapeake. I'm here before you to try to get a conditional permit for over 4 gaming machines in a convenience store, a total of 16, like you said before. I'm actually a distributor of these machines, so I'm very familiar with them. If there's any questions that you may have on them from Northern Virginia down to North Carolina. But as per the guidelines, we tried to make sure that we had plenty of room for the games that we would have inside. And since I have experience on the amount of traffic that goes to the machines in this specific location, we do have the available space. He told you the hours. I was under the impression that I received a approval from the Civic League. When I met with the Civic League, Mr. Ryder said that there was an approval going to go through. I don't know how exactly that works, but I was told that they had an approval on it. But it's the same machines you see basically in most 7-Elevens and convenience stores. Most of the time you don't notice them, that they're there. And what I would like to do is use them as a source of income instead of selling alcohol in the convenience store, to supplement that, because I personally don't want to sell alcohol in the convenience store.
Are you getting rid of alcohol?
I'm not selling alcohol, that's correct.
You're not? Okay.
I'm not selling alcohol, yes. Also, there's a confusion too. I'm not selling vape products either. I don't know how that was on there, but we don't plan on selling vape products either. But yeah, that's all I have, unless you have any questions. I might be able to answer about the machines or the business or anything like that.
How many, I think, Mr. Murphy asked how many players at each game.
There are 2 machines that take 6 players. Each other machine, there's 1. So if you talk about total seats, you're talking about 28 total seats, if that's how you want to factor it in.
Thank you, Mr. Donham. Any questions of Mr. Donham, Commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Here to speak in opposition to this application, Susan Quate.
Good afternoon. I live at 1512 Duke of Windsor Road in Virginia Beach. I happen to be an owner of 4800 Collie Avenue, which is directly across the street from this store.
Ms.
And
Quate, give us your mailing address if you would.
it's 4807 Collie Avenue, Norfolk.
Thanks.
I spoke to David. We did send an email, which I'm guessing you didn't get. Okay, then I will recap. I would start by saying I am a Norfolk native too. I grew up in Norfolk. Though as I look around the room, I might be the oldest Norfolk native in this room.
No, I'm going to claim that if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll give it to you. I'm very concerned about the parking. We don't have designated parking at our building, and forever, since 1960, people have parked on the street. But increasingly, there's more traffic on Collie Avenue, and I applaud the city because I think the changes on Collie have been transformational. But parking has become tighter and tighter and tighter. And I'm not quite sure I understand how, if you have 16 gaming tables, and unlike a convenience store where you go and buy a pack of cigarettes or you get some Gatorade, you go and you buy and you leave. Gaming, you stay. So you stay, and you stay for untold periods of time. It used to be you could park on the side streets, 48th, 47th, but now you have a lot of houses that were probably at one time single-family homes and now have 4, 5, 6 kids hanging out the windows with their cars. So parking gets tighter and tighter and tighter. I did speak with David Ryder, who is with the Civic League. It was my understanding he was going to see if this could be postponed, but evidently that's not the case. And I do question, I think when I spoke to David, you said that originally it was 4 gaming tables, 4 gaming units, and now it's 16? Is that wrong?
We'll respond to that, ma'am. We'll get
Okay,
him to respond to
so
that. Go ahead with your
I
comment.
question the quantity. I question, it's a quiet stretch of Colley Avenue, and a lot of residential. There are actually 2 houses next to us on Colley Avenue, so it's quasi-residential, whatever it's zoned. And I just question how this affects a neighborhood, and it is a neighborhood. And I applauded your effort to postpone till they could do further study, because I think it merits further study.
Thank you, Ms. Quaid.
Thank you.
Are you finished your comments? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Good.
Okay.
Any questions of Ms. Quaid, commissioners? Thank you, ma'am. Since there was the opposition, Mr. Donahan, do you want to respond rebuttal-wise?
Just to clarify a couple things, the business license was actually purchased when it was 4 machines by right. So the request is for the additional machines for the special permit. If you've ever driven by 4800 Colley, you'll notice that after 11 p.m., 50% to 80% of the parking lot is filled up. But if you go by before 11 p.m., there's nobody in that parking area. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with driving by there, but if you've been by there anytime within the last 3, 4, 5 months and you look and see, that parking lot is actually completely clear. Just to cover those concerns. Neighborhoods, like I say, I've dealt with this from Northern Virginia down to North Carolina. I have not come across any complaints with the machines and what they bring to neighborhoods yet. That's not to say they don't exist or can't come up, but they don't bring a negative element into a neighborhood when we add them from the experience that I have. But that's all I had for that part.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions, commissioners, of Mr. Donahan? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Quaid, anything further you'd like to add?
I recognize change is good and change is coming, and there are certainly a lot of changes that have taken place on Colley Avenue. Most of it, I believe, is transformational. It's a pleasure to drive down and see the restaurants, see the streets at live at night. But I also think you need to be careful how you go forward. That's all.
Sage
Thank you.
advice. Thank you very much, Ms. Quaid. Commissioners, any comment?
Just a clarification on the kind of gaming machine we're talking about in this location.
Mr. Donner, can you give us some further clarification on the types of gaming machines?
Yes, sir. They're skill-based gaming machines. The best way I can explain it, it's similar to a roulette wheel with tic-tac-toe that you can add to it to make it skill-based machine. So you can roll a wheel and then you can move things. Have you ever played Bejeweled? It's similar. It's like
That's why I'm asking.
I got
Yeah,
you.
I'm asking these questions because I don't know.
Okay, it's similar to a Bejeweled game, and there's another one that's popular, the one that actually has 6 seats. What it is you shoot a animated missile and it blows things up. And when it blows things up, instead of getting points, it gives you money. It's basically
So
how
it's
you break it down.
gambling.
It's gaming.
Oh yeah, it's definitely it's a gambling issue. They're skill-based gambling machines. Yeah, that's
Well,
absolutely.
in our
right.
great city, it's gaming. They haven't gotten
Yes,
to
sir. I'm sorry.
gambling
Skill-based
yet.
gaming machines.
Is there semantics
apologize.
here?
It's a little bit.
I didn't want to be deceptive on.
No,
what-
you're not.
Okay.
You're not.
get it.
We get it, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comment, question, commissioners? Hearing none, I would make the same motion that I made on the prior application, that we continue this for the 120-day period to allow for the benefit of parking related study associated with these types of applications and enterprises. I so move.
Is there a second? Okay. Just to throw something out, and I don't know, and I'm not making a recommendation one way or the other, but technically you're dealing with 3 separate conditional use permits. So you could move to continue one and take a different action on the other 2, if that was the commission's desire, or just take them all at once and deal with, and continue all of them. Just, again, not making a recommendation, just letting you know that is an option, that you can divide this question and take separate action on each of the 3 conditional use permits.
Are there additional expenses to the applicant to come back before us?
No, I mean,
we
the
separate it?
fee's been paid,
Okay.
and it's just a matter of,
And they can continue their current operation without any of these approvals, correct?
Is that correct?
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Is that correct?
They've been operating.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so they can continue without these proofs. So maybe it's safer just to continue all of them and be cleaner that way.
Well, we haven't voted yet. That's the motion. We don't have it. Do we need a second? Yes.
It was seconded.
It was? Okay, I'm sorry.
So we're going to continue all 3 conditional use permits also to the May 28th City Planning Commission public hearing. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchins?
Nay.
Was that a no?
Nay. No.
Mr. Murphy?
You know, there's so many good things happening in North Cali that this is incongruent with. And we like to call ourselves a resilient city, and I can think of nothing less resilient than gambling and smoking. So I would hope that the commission would be anxious to vote in opposition to this application. I vote no.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
No.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Dr. Fairley, or Mr. Fairley?
I'll accept, Doctor. I vote in favor of the motion that's made. Seems that we have a 4-3 vote in favor of the motion to extend for 120 days. We'll,
Date of the May public hearing, correct?
the date of the
May
May
20th,
20,
correct.
May 20th public hearing. We have a continuance. Thank you.
Okay, item number 11, Guad's Mexican Restaurant. For a conditional use permit at 7515 Granby Street to operate a restaurant with extended hours of operation. The purpose of this request is to allow the existing restaurant to expand and operate until 2:00 a.m.
Hello again. So we have a conditional use permit application for 7515 Granby Street on the west side of Granby Street between Burley Avenue, am I saying that right? And Maycox Avenue. And this is in Ward's Corner. It's an existing use, and the proposed change are 2 things. Changing the hours of operation, currently 10 a.m. to 2 a.m., 7 days a week, and they'd like to open an hour earlier at 9 a.m. and remain open till 2 a.m. And there's also a small addition proposed. They would be adding, I believe it's 4 outdoor seats, and the total capacity is 148 seats. As we touched on last time, there was an expansion that we weren't aware of into another restaurant, so I believe this permit would cover that. We originally thought there were 48 seats inside. There are more, so this conditional use permit issuance would rectify that being out of compliance. And they would have a legal capacity at that time of 148 seats. Oops, sorry. Staff is is recommending approval contingent upon the adherence to the recommendations in the staff report.
Thank you, David. Commissioners, any question of Mr. Barley? Stand by, David. Appreciate it,
Yes, sir.
sir.
Thank you.
The chair acknowledges the applicant and the applicant's rep, Vicky Haskell, as well as Robin Thomas. Any comment or question, commissioners? There is no opposition. Susan?
The motion is recommend approval of the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions contained in the draft ordinance. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins? Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley.
I will make that recommendation to council. Good luck.
Okay, the next item is item number 12, Virginia Cheese Company for conditional use permit for the sale of alcoholic beverages off premises at 501 Botetourt Street. The purpose of this request is to allow the restaurant to sell alcoholic beverages for off-premises consumption.
So we have a proposed use for a restaurant with off-premise alcohol sales at 501 Botetourt Street at the corner of West Butte Street and Botetourt Street. Existing use, I believe was it the Macaroon? Hummingbird, sorry, was in there prior. And so we have a conditional use permit application to allow the sale of wine and beer for off-premise consumption. The property is zoned HCWF2, which is the West Freemason Historic and Cultural Conservation District. Oops, and that's all there is. Staff recommends approval of this application contingent upon the adherence to the recommended conditions in the staff report.
She will also be a restaurant, but for that, because she's closing by, or I should say before 11 o'clock, and she's not having entertainment, she will get a zoning certificate for that.
Okay.
So she's going to be a restaurant, and then she'll also sell off, so she needs the conditional use permit just for the off-premise.
What are we selling for off-premise? Growlers?
No, just beer and wine.
Just beer and wine?
Not even, obviously.
And be singles of like, I think, well, it'd be things that typically don't come in six packs. Sorry, not much of a beer aficionado.
Understood. Thank you, David. Any question on Mr. Barley, commissioners? Thank you, David. The chair acknowledges the applicant, Ashland Green and Sterling Billing away with Smith. Okay. Here in opposition to this application, Sally McNeil. McNeil. Microphone is yours, ma'am. Oh, you coming? I'm sorry. I thought you were walking out the door. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Ashton Green. I'm owner of Virginia Cheese Company. So we will be a cut-to-order cheese counter. We will be curating beer and wine to go with the cheese. If you have any questions, be happy to answer.
Commissioners, stand by.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for that confusion. Next time you can save yourself some hassle and give it to one of the staff members and you can be talking. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sally McNeilin, 404 West Butte. If you look at the front picture there, I am the home immediately adjacent to this parcel. I am one of 100, it's a 120-year-old. It's one of the 11 single-family residents still in Freemason, in your historic neighborhood that you advertise. There are 11 of us left. If you look at that picture, our windows, when the home was built 120 years ago, there was a home on the west side of us. So all of our windows are on the east side, on the alley. My living room, my bedroom only have windows on the alley. Anyway, so if you look at that picture, my front door and my front porch is 4 feet from the back door of this establishment. Do you want off-site alcohol sales 4 feet from your front door? We have a continued problem with parking in the neighborhood. My own daughter came home yesterday afternoon late. There was not a single parking place on our street. She had groceries. She called me. You couldn't park. In fact, there's a car in that picture that's parked and has been parked overnight in the loading zone only. We are not being patrolled. Since Kim left the neighborhood, tickets are not handed out. They park across the driveways for my neighbors. It's too hard to try and get the police there to tow and ticket. We walk into the neighboring businesses yelling, who's parked, you're blocking our driveway. You can't get out to go to work, to whatever. It is a very big problem. And now you're going to add another business that is bringing more traffic to our neighborhood, not exactly historic in nature. The big problem for me, though, is trash. And when the cure came before you several years, 7, 8 years ago, I forget how long it's been, one of the conditions you put on the cure and then Shady Grove Market that was in this space was that trash would go out the front door and not be hauled through the alley underneath our windows, which we greatly appreciate. We would like that stipulation put on this business because we like to use our front porch. When the weather's nice, we sit out there, talk to the dog walkers and the neighbors and whatever. Also that the business not operate with the back door open, and this has been a consistent problem with some of the other neighbors. In the past 7 years, we have seen the value of our home with the city appraiser's office dropped $200,000. This was done by the appraiser's office. Now, I appreciate the reduction in taxes. However, all of this devaluation has been done based on the businesses in this 501 building.
Ms. McNeilon, your time has expired.
I understand. Thank you.
Also here to speak against this, here to speak, it doesn't say, is Jeremy McGee.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Jeremy McGee at 724 Graydon Avenue. My fiance and I own 411 York, the bed and breakfast just around the corner from the applicant. We were in a similar position almost 2 years ago. As you have heard, there are some similar concerns. I will say that from a parking perspective, that is indeed a very valid concern, but it's a concern that exists whether you grant this business a conditional use permit to offer beverage to go or not. As far as I can tell, this business could open tomorrow with a zoning certificate if they simply remove the beverage to go component. I also think the beverage to go component doesn't exacerbate the parking problem. I could almost argue that it improves the parking situation. And then I'll also add that I think the presence of a conditional use permit gives the city more oversight, control, and leverage to encourage good behavior and good citizenship from the applicant, and I think that's good for all involved. In terms of dealing with the parking issues directly, I'm here to encourage the applicant to be respectful, thoughtful, and proactive in terms of helping ensure their guests park in the appropriate places and do not interfere with the residents or other businesses. On the trash issue, I think we've made some improvements on that since we were last here. We've fired the trash vendor. We've partnered with the other neighbors, and we've placed a few cameras in good spots, and I think that situation has been improved. But I'd also encourage the applicant to be extremely mindful of the potential issue that could cause, both to themselves, the other businesses, and to the neighbors. Beyond that, I think the cheese company's concept appears to be innovative, interesting, and a nice addition to the neighborhood. Speaking of the neighborhood, I'll say that we've learned that this is a very special corner of Norfolk that has welcomed us in with open arms, despite some initial trepidation. We all know that the key ingredient of great neighborhoods is great neighbors, and we encourage the applicant to try to be a great neighbor in all that they do, including towards those that have expressed concern about their project. That policy has served us well and will undoubtedly serve the applicant well and the neighborhood well into the future. We look forward to welcoming Virginia Cheese to the neighborhood, and I'm here to answer any questions as an interested and welcoming neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Any questions of Mr. McGee, commissioners? Hearing none, we're in the rebuttal phase. Ms. Green?
So regarding trash, we have been alerted to the trash situation and are willing to go out the front door. Parking, so far we have on our website to use the parking garages, any other public transportation in the area. And anytime we advertise an event, we'll make sure that we are very forward about where to park and to be conscientious of our neighbors.
I really can't hear you well.
I'm sorry.
You're speaking very back in your throat. It makes it difficult to hear.
I'm sorry.
Is that
Is
a
this
permit?
better?
Is that permit parking on your street?
There is, I think it's 2-hour parking, but it's permits as well. I'm not sure.
I know there's residential permit parking in West Freemason. I don't know off the top of my head to which streets it
I
applies.
guess it's right there on your picture.
Well, Miss McNeilin will be up here in just a minute. I'm sure she'll share that with us.
Yeah.
You can park all the way down through the Y is 2-hour parking too.
I see it.
Ms. Green, anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ms. McNeilin, you have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Again, my concern is trash, and would you really want off-site alcohol being sold next to your front door? I understand we bought into a mixed-use neighborhood, but repeatedly we have been told that we have to be that we have to bend to the businesses. Not once have I heard anyone on this commission tell the businesses that they needed to try and cooperate with the neighborhood. I will say that Mr. McGee and Malia, for months before they even came before this group, were reaching out to the neighbors. They reached out to Voila. They met with my next door neighbor, Mr. Murray, my husband and I. We said, repeatedly, Jeremy came to us to try and work out, and he brought, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll do, to try and work with the neighborhood. We have not been seeing this from Ms. Green. In fact, the whole thing was pushed through by a couple members of the Freemason Association board, and we found out quite by accident that this was even coming in mid-December. No, at that point, she had made no attempt to contact. I'm 4 foot from the back door. Knock on my door. Or even the other members in the other tenants in the building. We told them that this was coming. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
think what you would want to live with.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, any comment or question?
Only that I don't know how many of us are familiar. I suppose all of us have pretty much been in that area and have frequented. It is a very congested parking situation, and personally, I'm not sure that all questions have been really answered.
It's a parking challenge, but that's part of living downtown. If I live downtown, I would fully expect to have parking issues, and there's trade-offs. I also would expect myself personally to be able to walk to convenience stores, be able to walk to restaurants, be able to walk to a place where I can get an alcoholic beverage next door. That's part of, in my opinion, part of living downtown.
This is a very good point, that it can be done, the business can be by right there, just without the alcohol sales. Parking there, I think, it's unique. It's going to be an issue, but I don't drive when I go down there. I just
No.
bike or hop off light rail. It ends right there.
Well, I totally agree with that, is that you're gonna have to accept trade-offs. The issue is does this make it impossible, or is it within what one has to accept? That's the question for me.
Well, we do expect them to be good neighbors with their surrounding folks. I think we always encourage our businesses to work with our residents. I think, I know that you've been in opposition to Jeremy's project back in the beginning, but we were able to work, and you have great neighbors there. And I'm glad that that's worked out. I was always confident it would. And I would expect the same here. And I think if there are ongoing, if there's issues at all, you bring them to our attention when they come up, and we'll go the appropriate route to make sure that they do cooperate in there. I think I'm willing to give them a chance.
Well said, Dr. Newman. Good neighborhoods are not made by neighbors who live in houses, but neighbors who happen to operate businesses in those neighborhoods. I would expect, and I'm sure we all would expect that all of our neighbors, whether commercial, retail, or residential, that happen to be within proximity of one another, would be good cooperating neighbors, making sure that any inconveniences are minimized on each other as best as possible. Downtown is a serious, serious challenge. West Freemason is crowded. But that's, as Mr. Hale said, that's the choice you make in many instances when you move into an environment like that. But having said that, we're going to entertain this application now. Susan? I'm sorry. Go ahead, George.
Mr. Chairman, there was a request from Mrs. McNeilon to add condition about the trash going out the front door, and I believe the applicant agreed that that would be something
Let's
that
get
should
a
be willing.
concurrence, Ms. Green. Trash through the front door, not the alley. I say that for the record, so everybody's on board.
Be a condition.
Okay.
Susan?
Okay. The motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit, subject to the approval of the conditions contained in the draft ordinance, in addition to a condition stating that the trash shall be removed through the front door. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
I would like to thank the resident for coming down and just kind of pointing out some things. I think, if nothing else, you did open some eyes for the business owners, and they will be on their P's and Q's. By all means, if there's some things that are part of this conditional use permit that are not being adhered to, I would encourage you to come down and let staff know. With that, I do vote aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fraley?
I will make that recommendation to council. Good luck. Item 13, Susan.
Okay, this is a request by Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority to vacate the right-of-way of a 16-foot wide lane alley east of Colley Avenue between Front Street and Woodis Avenue.
Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application is for right-of-way vacation, and the applicant is Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority, NRHA. The applicant is requesting to vacate an unnamed alley between Front Street and Woodis Avenue to the east of Colley Avenue. The right-of-way to be vacated is going to be used as a parking. And on the north and south of the unnamed lane is a vacant parking lot, and to the west of the alley is a senior housing living facility, Harbor's Edge Apartments. The right-of-way to be vacated is located in Fort Norfolk neighborhood, and the appropriate utility easement with Cox Communication and Virginia Natural Gas has been made. Staff has determined that the right-of-way to be vacated is appropriate and is not necessary for access in the future. So with that, we recommend approval, and I stand by for any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Patel, commissioners?
Thank you so much.
Here to speak in favor of this application, Mr. Charles Land. Thank you, sir. Chair acknowledges that there is no opposition to this application. Any comment, commissioners? Hearing none. Susan?
Okay, the motion is to recommend approval of the vacation of the right-of-way, subject to any necessary easements. Ms. Houston? Ms. Austin? Mr. Houchins? I combined the two.
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fairley?
I will make that recommendation to council. Good luck. Item 2.1, new business,
New
Susan.
business. So this is to initiate a zoning text amendment to create a use and set of performance standards for the sale, rental, and maintenance of recreational vehicles, and to create the appropriate permissions for the use in the commercial and industrial base zoning districts. So this is, Jeremy spoke with you all about this last week, so this is just really initiating it so we can look into it and come up with a recommendation for next month.
We need a motion or a second, Susan?
Yeah, the motion is to initiate the zoning text amendment.
So moved, I second.
Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Houchins?
Moved and second. You did.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes.
Dr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Hales?
Aye.
And Mr. Fairley?
Aye. So look forward to that. Commissioners, any comment?
I'm sorry, but just two quick things.
Yes, ma'am.
If we could get, I noticed one of the applicants put their Airbnb rating and some, like several months worth of things. The other one didn't. I did look it up while they were here, and they also had a 5. Can we make it part of the application where they have to provide like a document that shows their rating and maybe like, I don't know, 3 months
So
worth of?
they're illegally operating and they're good
Yes,
illegal operators?
yes.
Yes,
But it
sure.
would, it would at least be interesting to see, you know, what their ratings
Yeah,
are.
sure.
I mean, we can look them up, but make it easier if they had to provide that. And my other question was, can we, and I know it's a little premature for our next meeting, but if we can get any kind of updates from our esteemed attorney on any General Assembly actions relative to these games of skill as bills are moving through. I know it's crazy right now, but I've tried to follow some of it, and I've been successful in part of it, but not all of it. And so if we can just to help us with our 120-day thing, just to see what we're going through with that. Because I do think that there's going to be action, and so if nothing else, how you tax it.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Melita has historically been quite diligent keeping our feet out of the fire with those things.
Yeah, I'll get you a status report on that.
Thank you.
Any other comment, commissioners? Mr. Homewood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I didn't get a chance to complete the director's comments in our informal meeting, so let me shortcut a few of them. As you all know, one of the things that we've been working on diligently over the past several years is improving the city's responsiveness and regulatory authority with respect to flooding in the floodplain. And that has generated a push to reduce the city's community rating system rating from our current 7, hopefully to a 5. But in the process of doing that, and a 5, by the way, would give everybody in the city a 25% discount on their flood insurance, which is not insignificant. But to do that, we have to staff up, and so I always enjoy the opportunity to introduce new staff. So we now have a person who is Tristan Barnes, who is here to work with our community rating system and to sort of, bird dog that and stay on top of it. When you move to where we're moving to, it requires that every elevation certificate we receive is literally perfect. And we get an annual review instead of a biennial review. So these are things that go along with improving our rating and improving our service to the community. So I'm going to ask her supervisor, Mr. Simons, to jump up and introduce Ms. Barnes to you.
This is Ms. Tristan Barnes. She's joined us from York County.
At the microphone, please.
All right. This is Ms. Tristan Barnes. She's joined us from York County. And before that, she worked as a stormwater engineer in York County. Before that, she was working with Isle of Wight to help them with their CRS progress and worked there as a planner
specifically in floodplain management for 7 years.
Welcome, Ms. Barnes.
Welcome to the city.
Yes, very happy.
Instead of the
Thank you.
country.
Good luck with that. Thank you. That is George?
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Melita, you have anything for us?
No, sir.
Commissioners, if you don't have any compelling thoughts or ideas at this point, I hereby declare this meeting adjourned.
At the end of the day, can we just?
We're through, sir, but you can come.